texture like sun lays me down. With my mind she runs throughout the night. No need to fight, never a frown, with golden brown. Every time, just like the last, on her ship, tied to the mast, to distant land.
Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here, coming at you live from my studio / RV dining room from in and around Appalachia. Normally, I'd prescribe a shenanigan infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude. However, not tonight, not when we're talking about things such as murder of young men and the Smiley Face Killer cult. I will be your pilot navigator for tonight's adventure, and joining me here is the host of the Occult Rejects, Nick and Liza. Welcome, Nick and Liza. How y'all doing?
Very much. Good. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. Appreciate y'all joining me here. I know we've talked about the Smiley Face Killers in great detail. I'd say probably what, eight shows probably.
Oh,
Does that sound about right?
I think we did 5 on the Occult Rejects itself.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably. Yeah, so probably somewhere in the ballpark of 10 hours at least. I'd say Smiley Face Killer discussions we've had, kind of going into some of the greater case details going on with the situation. Right, we kind of broke it down to some very minute levels. Kind of analyzing the economy surrounding some of these cities and bars and some of the organizations that exist in these areas that are connected to some of these folks. So if any folks of the interwebs wish for a greater detail of some of these topics, I highly recommend checking out those discussions on the Occult Rejects.
Thank you very much, sir.
Oh no, for sure. I think it's some of the the greater details and discussions that have been had. I mean, I know folks like William Ramsey and his primary researcher Jim Smith do some great research, and I've heard some great interviews from those folks in regards to their thoughts on the Smiley Face Killer phenomenon.
Yeah,
and they've gone into some great details in their documentaries they did. I highly recommend those documentaries to folks all the time to see because I think what they've done there is really capture the scope of what's going on in this phenomenon. Whereas, some of what we'd approached in our podcast series and actual, some a lot of visual, details that we added there with maps and et cetera. And of course, BD's forensic astrology analysis. So a lot of stuff to view there, and the great details we went to from a slightly different angle, trying to capture a lot of the details surrounding these murders. So definitely worth checking out for folks to want to gain a better understanding of what's going on here. Because as I look, what we're going to discuss here tonight, what I appreciate y'all joining me for here is just to generalized kind of topical discussion on the Smiley Face Killers, or what I like to call the Smiley Face Killers cult, because the idea of the Smiley Face Killers is simply a media, interpretation of what the original detectives who came up with this theory were trying to, they were trying to assert to the public through press conferences, and the media kind of bent it and as they do, and twist it in their own ways. And I think it was a very disingenuous effort on the media's part back in 2008, because I think they, kind of try to put a nickname like the Smiley Face Killer on it, and then to kind of make a comical twist out of it. They were trying to pervert the whole thing to make it look ridiculous. And I think they succeeded in that, because a lot of folks, as I read over the years of, different message boards and whatnot on the topic, or watch or listen to different podcasts or videos, which there's numerous videos now on YouTube on the subject. And there's numerous videos claiming that it's not a real thing. So these are that's the opinion. I don't, these people, I don't take them very seriously, but these things are get 40,000, 200,000 views. I see on some of these videos that are claiming, that they debunked the Smiley Face Killers. And again, I think that starts with the onset of how the media framed it, in order for folks to kind of continue doing stuff like that today. But I want to go over some of those details. Got a couple cases I want to compare that I think are very important in understanding at least what the phenomenon has evolved into. Because when began, back circa 1998 in New York City, it there wasn't the connectivity of social media. There wasn't the connectivity or activity surrounding dating apps. I think those elements are two factors that the phenomenon is involved into as far as targeting and stalking the victims. And two of the cases that we're going to compare, certainly touch on those elements, and and then also want to just address some of the other, provide some substance to some of the other statements I've made surrounding the subject of the Smiley Face Killers, because there I think there's a greater parapolitical kind of connection to, because the next question is really, if you're going to determine that this is a real phenomenon, is why is it not being investigated? Why is no one taking it seriously? And I think to that extent, there are some, higher political, socioeconomic powers that at play that are kind of prohibiting those things. And I think that's kind of seen through some of the mechanisms and measures in which these folks are being stalked today, the dating app world, right? Because some of those folks that own and operate and run these dating app services are some of the biggest names in kind of media and electronic media. And connected to, very powerful people, so those are kind of the details I want to discuss. What are your all's thoughts on some of those subjects there, Nick and Lisa?
You can go, Lisa.
Well, like you had said, I think we've done our due diligence in looking into some of this stuff. We have looked at different angles that I don't think are thoroughly covered by other people who have covered for sure. the topic. Definitely Nick has looked into a lot of the background on some of like law enforcement and medical examiners, people who own some of the bars in some of these places. And we've looked at kind of their connections with that. And Nick can talk more about that, but I've looked into the medical examiners as well. A lot of these people that do cover the smiley face, and I'll get to the point about the debunking, is that they don't look at anything tangential. And I do know that a lot of people say, well, I don't want to give into conspiracy theories. I'm just going to report the facts. But the thing is that the only facts that you're going to report is the facts that are given to you by the media that is selective about the things that are being told to you, right? Sure. And so I lived in Austin for a bit, and I was privy to the local news when this was happening. And so when the local news would cover it, immediately they would cover the statement given by the police saying that there was no foul play, even though it was like the day of they found the body. And right. So it was almost like, wow, how can you determine that so fast? I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the criteria is. Well, if I may interject
there, Lisa, there's a couple cases there. Speaking of the seemingly malfeasant actions of the law enforcement and medical examiners' offices in some of these jurisdictions this is occurring. Austin, they have not identified some of the victims, right? Is that correct?
Correct.
Some of the victims they found, they just still have not publicly identified who this dead person was that they found in these Smiley Face Killer victimization, environment.
And there are a lot of bodies that have been unidentified. And if they ever did make a positive ID, they never released that to the public. Now, if you have to submit some sort of request for some of this stuff, what do you even begin to look for? Because I downloaded a sheet, right? Because I was going to request some autopsy reports or whatever. Immediately, you need to know a case number and you need to know the name. Well, if you don't know a name, who are you asking for? If you don't know a name, how could you even access a case number? All you know is going based on if you do kind of like a combing through the media reports year by year, month by month, and then verify that it's accurate or that they followed up on it. Who knows? But in terms of, and I don't know if the correct word would be complete. Not silence, but just this blanket, statement that's always given when bodies are found is definitely a thing that does happen in the local media. Forget the national, forget the federal, whatever. In local media, immediately it is just, well, no foul play. And on to the weather. I mean, no joke.
we covered that in the Riley Strain case there back in the spring in Nashville, Tennessee. That's,
Right.
I mean, that was what you just described that was the press conference within 2 hours of finding his body.
And one of the things that I thought was interesting, because I was friends with some of the local law enforcement, personal friends, and I inquired. I was like, they didn't know I was on a podcast or anything. I was like, do you have anything? They're like, oh, no, it's just people that basically get drunk and fall in the water. And it was almost like, come on, really? And they're like, no, you don't understand. And I'm thinking, no, I don't think you understand. And it literally was a consensus among the people that I spoke to. I'm not saying all law enforcement, but the people that I spoke to, it was a consensus that no, people are making it bigger than what it is. People like to sensationalize, people like to run with stories, and it really isn't that big of a deal. Which
I think is a pretty, if I may interject again, Lisa, I think that's a great point, because I think from my experience working within a law enforcement organizations, in the past, in the Air Force before, I retired, it's been a few years, but I still remember how it went. So within this is occurring, there's only going to be a handful of folks within the department that are going to have any knowledge of the actual circumstances of these deaths. That and like the medical examiner's office. So outside of that, that will be a very commonly accepted thing, I'm sure, is that these are accidents, and each other officer will help perpetrate that myth upon the other officer, because that's just going to be the generally commonly accepted practice or understanding of what occurred amongst any department, because they don't have the details and they're just blindly trusting
Yes.
that their superiors are doing the right thing. Yes. When in time after time, it shows the people that are not, that are making these decisions are not making reasonable or sound or objectively honest decisions. Like, for example, the Dakota James case. I mean, there's been evidence after evidence provided to the medical examiner there in Pittsburgh in Allegheny County. Is it Allegheny County? Whatever the county is there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And even the DA's office was on board for opening up, looking at the case and looking at the second medical examiner's private autopsy and whatnot. But the medical examiner's office just keeps ignoring it. So, there are these instances where there's individuals in these positions of responsibility that are clearly acting out of turn and not doing the right thing. And yeah, I think it's but I think it's easily covered up amongst these departments, because it's only a handful of folks that would know the details, and the other folks are just going to perpetrate that myth just because that's their normal.
Absolutely.
I really think that's Absolutely. How it goes down.
And one more thing to insert is that initially, whenever, it was kind of all speculative and people really weren't knowing a whole lot. And then it seemed to take an uptick in the past year or something, where everybody was kind of starting to pay attention to the bodies that were turning up in Austin.
Sure.
All of a sudden, you started to just not see it being reported, period.
Sure.
Like at all. And so you started to it almost seemed like there was a clamp down of, well, if we don't report it, then nobody will look into it, because we're only reporting minimal stuff. And so I think that's a huge one too, is that the tight lip on reporting as well. And then, and we can get into it later, but actually the medical examiner thing, that's a whole nother rabbit hole that I'm very surprised that no one has really looked into. Gratefully, we have looked into it. And hopefully we'll put that out at some point, to kind of cover some of the things that we have found with the medical examiners. But I don't want to, Nick, please step in. I mean, a lot of stuff that we've done. So.
Well, yeah, I was going to say something about the MEs. I do think, in my opinion, if she was to actually cover that, it'd be pretty mind-opening. Pretty mind-blowing, in my opinion, actually. And not to knock her, but it's a shame that we haven't done it already, because there's a lot of stuff in there that I think will actually, it's nothing nobody's covered yet before or shown, and I'm not trying to sound fucked up. And this is why I laughed before, because of even something Lisa said, I was thinking of the same thing in my mind. Unfortunately, you also have people around on social media who basically just post a news article and say, "Oh, that's SFK," and doesn't seem like this makes sense. You're not
like it when they make it
advocating for the fucking family, just doing that.
I like it when they make it break it down to one person, they call it the Smiley or something like that. You know what I mean?
No, but He says you do have a lot of people out there who really aren't doing jack shit about this and like patting themselves on the back and putting a gold star on their chest. And like I think that the 5-part series that we did was actually pretty extensive. There's a lot of stuff in there, and I think if people were just to, it's kind of funny with this topic. It's a conspiracy in itself to think something's wrong with this. But if you don't want to go into conspiracy theories, then why are you even doing this?
You basically,
like, I want to
just describe
conspiracy theories, but you thinking this is a crime like the way it is, you just concocted a conspiracy.
There's an entire true crime series that concocts a conspiracy around some of these cases, but completely says it's like, comes to the conclusion there's no Smiley Face Killer, but has created new conspiracies out of the elements that cause these men's death. And I'm just like, well, that's just crazy. You're just creating new conspiracy theories in which to avoid trying to explain the one thing that there is evidence of, and that is, in my opinion, a cult that has been conducting these operations. And they are operations, in my opinion, because they are conducted with some surgical precision at times, including getting men out of bars or sporting arenas or concerts. It's not an easy task to especially if you're drugging that man and it's dead weight. It's not an easy task to extricate that individual from that, whatever that establishment is.
But I mean, I will even say, like, when it came to the Austin stuff, because I was really much more on with that, with Lisa, because that's, we were covering that. And then we had you come on to cover the other cases, but I really, covered Austin with her. There was a lot of weird stuff with that whole situation in the Austin one.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, I guess, like, it can kind of be too conspiratorial for some people, but I mean, it's just very weird when you start looking, like she was saying before, there's connections with people who own multiple bars, and they're connected to like even the music production companies. And then like all of a sudden the Rotary Club,
all the tech stuff
popping up too, which makes no sense.
Oh, what was that, Nick? I apologize. I stepped on you there.
No, I said, and then like how the Rotary Club starts tying in. Like I people probably don't want to think much about that, but I'm telling you, something is weird with that. Something is definitely weird with that. They have access to boats.
Oh, for sure. Well, and I look at that like something like the Rotary Club, which again I think that's a great point you all brought up there in that Austin coverage of the Smiley Face Killer activity going on presently still today down there. It's been a couple weeks, I think, since the last body was recovered from Lady Bird Lake, but it's been very recent. I saw one. Lisa, do you recall when the last one was?
I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I know it was in August sometime. And granted, I think it's, and I thought, oh, okay, well, it's fall, so this is going to start again. But, to be honest with you, it's one of those things to where I'm waiting. I no longer jump on immediately when I see that there's a body that has been recovered. I give it a few weeks, only because usually there's not any stuff that comes out, or they'll say, oh no, it was an accidental, it was an accident, somebody was called for help or whatever, and it wasn't in a body or something like that. So it's
sure.
You know what I mean? And so you do have these people like, oh, there's someone missing, and immediately you see all these posts about, oh, there's a person missing and blah blah blah, and then they end up finding, they're like, oh, okay, well, thank God they whatever. And so I guess
there has been a couple of those where men have been missing for a few days there that they do later find.
And then they do later find them. Yeah. Which is interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Another thing I even want to mention, I think, like, when it comes to even the stuff that all of us have covered, or even like me and Lisa, when it comes to these crimes, I think another issue, my opinion, I feel like it's kind of like a stagnant topic at this point, because it doesn't seem like anything new seems to be coming up. And I do think part of that is just lack of people looking in certain areas, because they just don't want to acknowledge that could be a problem. But like, I do think in order to keep pulling all these off,
that's a great point.
And if they are, again, if this is organized, and like let's say we covered 10, I'm just making up a number, 10 bodies at Lady Bird Lake. Let's say 7 of them are actually all done by like the same organization or whatever.
Sure.
You're going to have neither multiple outlets of pulling that off, or you're going to have people in multiple different areas to keep on letting this happen without getting caught.
It's a large operation.
You're going to have to start thinking the fucking cops might be involved. I'm so sorry, but they're not all perfect. You might have to think politicians and medical examiners might be involved, especially when they're members of a fraternity.
Right. No, we had a great comment
We
before.
believe this is a conspiracy theory, but we draw the line with the drownings, and then that's it.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I mean, it's a
go a
mix
little bit
between
farther than that.
blackmail, compromised people, cowards, and useful idiots amongst the police departments, the prosecutors' offices, the medical examiners' offices. I think that's a great comment. That's what you're saying there, Nick. I think is that it's you have. I mean, it is. You have to have elements of that in order to be pulling these crimes off.
I mean,
no
I'm
question about it.
not saying that all 5 of us. How many of us covered this topic? 4 of us when we did the 5-part series. I'm not saying we're all right, but I do think with the crimes that we covered, there is something seriously like wrong with these things. And it's not going to be that cut and dry. I don't think there is actually some deep spider webs with some of these crimes. I mean, I even thought it was weird how I found, I can't
spider
remember.
Webs, like Diddy spider webs?
Might be.
Diddy level spider webs?
But I mean, like that was another thing when I found that Boy Scouts connection. What the hell was up with that? There was like 60 people registered to this Boy Scouts, and they're all judges, energy people, and lawyers.
Yep, big time
and
money,
police.
Big money.
That's a huge one, and the connection of some of these like major players in Austin and their connection to the energy companies, that was huge. And I don't think a lot of people caught that when they listened to the video, because you don't see a whole lot of commentary about that, and nobody picked it up and ran with it, and nobody really wanted to discuss that, to be honest with you. And again, you see these people cover true crime, and they're not looking at that at all.
No.
And yet, I mean, that's a chock full amount of information. And then you have somebody that says, oh, well, I've been looking at this for a while, and that's why I decided to start my channel and cover this. And they already have like 1 million subscribers. No, I'm sorry. This is manufactured. This is AstroTurf. This isn't real.
Yes. Yeah, and there has been been an uptick in that activity for sure, Lisa. Because if you recall with the Riley Strain case, they had the YouTubers that were so involved, or the TikTokers, whatever platform they were on, the Instagrammers. They had social media influencers deeply involved with key aspects of of the recovery and discovery in that case of Riley Strain's belongings and body.
There was like
weird to have that real time effect. Oh, what was that, Nick?
There are shows that me and Lisa, not going to mention the names, that are pretty well known for sculpting the whole Kohlberger case in certain areas of YouTube.
Oh God!
And you can take those accounts. I forgot the name of the site, but it's actually a site where you can actually watch the growth. And all of a sudden, one day they get 10,000 subs showing up out of nowhere, and yet the video on that date has like maybe 800 views. So who is these subs even watching? This shit's
it's all anti-Kohlberger guilty stuff.
It's fake accounts.
Interesting.
Come on, yeah. People pop up with large numbers, and all of a sudden they are just deemed as having an answer. I hate to say it, it works like that. Unfortunately, humans are stupid like that. I am myself. I see an account with a big number, I think they got something to say.
Right. Well, it is deception. It makes you think it's either important or other folks find it important. It's that whole FOMO thing, the fear of missing out type of business, right?
You can't have 5 Thelemites inside your live chat with fucking wrenches in their names because they're mods and you don't know what a fucking tarot card is. That's bullshit.
I would agree with your assessment there.
Yeah, there's dudes in the chat with wrenches there, and they got the same tattoo. They got the same logo as my tattoo, and I'm like, and you really don't know what a fucking tarot card is? Come on, you guys are playing
for sure. No, there's some good statements here in the chat. Here, comments in the chat about the complicity and of law enforcement in some of these activities, perhaps. And I think that's that is an interesting thought, especially relative to a current situation popping off in Kentucky. I don't know if y'all are familiar with, or folks of the interwebs are familiar, but there was a sheriff. I can't remember which county now. He murdered the judge. It was all caught on camera. Murdered him in the judge's chamber. Apparently, after looking at the judge's phone and finding his daughter's phone number on the judge's phone, so it almost implies there was some sort of sexual shenanigans involving the judge and the sheriff's daughter. And the sheriff and the judge go way back because he was the bailiff for the judge before he was the sheriff. As a deputy sheriff, he was assigned as the bailiff as the judge. But yeah, I mean, I think I look at that situation like that's a small town in Kentucky, small county. that very well could be some sort of cult situation amongst the power players of that area, right? Like, something like a Delphi situation where clearly I mean, look at that thing just keeps spinning way and way more out of control as far as the cult to police ratio.
No, that thing is
and
weird
state
though, because
ratio.
you know
I
what's
don't want to
funny?
say everyone's. I don't want to say everyone's an Odinist in that situation, but no, there's not many parties that are coming off looking very good from the state, the judges, you know what I mean, the government, the law enforcement.
You know what's
They're
interesting?
not, if they're not part of the cult, they're not doing themselves any favors to distance themselves from that activity. They're by helping cover it up even further. Is what I'm saying.
What I find interesting with that crime is that, like, and I wish I even had the time or probably the passion to even cover it. Out of like all like the huge kind of crimes to be talked about, and that's like big on YouTube or whatever, as a catchy true crime thing. That one does have like the most obvious occult symbolism in it. And there's proof that these dudes had these patches. And like nobody touches on it.
Yeah, you're totally right. It has so much legs and it's ignored. It's ignored by
Yeah, I've thought about it before. Like, yeah, and if I had like the time or like even like the oomph, like, oh, I really want to cover that, I was like, probably do a good job.
Because I mean, that dude's getting his rights. That Richard Allen fellow's getting his rights violated, constitutional rights violated on a level that may even surpass Koberger. He may be getting violated worse than Koberger is right now. To be quite honest with you, it's pretty aggressive.
I even think with his case, it's quite possible that there was even other things prior to even show that it may not have been him before they even picked him up. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like Koberger, there's like so many little things that I feel like they use to like make the connections. This guy, it's like they had like 3 different drawings or 2 different drawings of somebody that didn't even look like him. It's like, how did you guy after all this?
Yeah, no, you're totally right. Because he introduced himself into the situation. They needed a suspect, and like, well, this poor sap who works as a pharmacist down at the CVS, he happened to be in the area near the time that we were looking for the subject. So he's our new guy. You know what I mean? I really think it was something like that because he came in early in the investigation and introduced himself into it, saying like, "Oh, I was there. Here's what I saw." Just as a witness statement, right? So 18 months later, whatever, when they arrested him or whatever it was, 2 years later, they had gone through a lot of other suspects that some of which had killed themselves, some of which had direct connections to other judges in Indiana, some of which were convicted pedophiles. So one guy had kids in his basement when the cops knocked down the door, if you recall, when we covered that on a show there on the Occult Rejects. Was it about last December? Maybe we covered. I think we covered one of the suspects had kids locked up in his basement when they kicked his door down. This is all before Richard Allen ever became in public mindset as far as a suspect goes. So there's so much.
You've also done a lot of work on the show. I honestly can't remember. I will say, I will have to say it, and thank you very much, JJ. I appreciate it. You have brought a lot of information to the Occult Rejects. So I mean, thank you.
For sure.
Yes, you have.
No, that's a good. I highly recommend that for folks of the interwebs who want to get a good analysis of the occult aspects and some actual analysis of the criminal aspects of that case. We did a show back I think it might have been January there on the Occult Rejects. I think Headless Giant joined us, if I recall.
Oh God, yeah, I remember what you're talking about. Yeah, this was a while ago.
I believe BD did Salerno did her forensic astrology of the circumstances.
Yes.
Very, very good show, all around analysis, I think, because I've seen what folks are like you mentioned, Nick. I've seen what folks are. There's so much legs to the cult aspects of that murder, and the stuff that covers it, and again the other suspects that were in the police file before Richard Allen, and again some of which have killed themselves, some of which had all these other crazy stuff going on. No one really talks about a lot of these very quote unquote juicy aspects of that case.
You know how many times I've gotten DM'd and emailed and be like, "How are you not covering this? It's blatantly occult." And I'm like,
"Yeah."
I've already wasted time on other true crime. I'm like, done.
We might have to readdress some of that stuff in the future. Then I don't know, because the last I looked at it, I was shocked again at the level of rights violations. So like when we're implying that there's medical examiners or law enforcement officers or even law enforcement departments that are acting in a malfeasant manner and covering up or being complicit in some of these Smiley Face Killer crimes, I don't think that's much of a stretch when you look at something like the Delphi situation and see how that power structure has been corrupted by what I don't think it's specifically an Odinist cult, because a lot of different cults use those runes. So I think that's a common misnomer in the case for my estimation. However, regardless, that was a cult ritual murder. All the evidence reflects that. None of the evidence reflects that Richard Allen had anything to do with it. I mean, the idea that they use an unspent bullet or whatever they want to call it in the court record, or a shell casing that allegedly had some sort of dents and grooves that were, compliant with the ejection port on Richard Allen's 6 hour. That's some of the most preposterous forensic analysis and evidence I've ever heard of. I can't believe that's in an actual case. There's no such thing as ejection port, like forensic study, of the bullet or the shell casing. Like, it's not like the tongues and the grooves and ridges that are in the barrel, right? Well, that's how bullets are identified. Is every time a barrel is constructed, the idea is, at least, that's uniquely a unique fingerprint, the way the grooves of the inside of the barrel are, which then leave the marks on the bullet. It has nothing to do with what they're trying to do with Richard Allen. They're like, oh, well, he ejected this round out of his gun, and it fell underneath one of the victims, but it wasn't found for 4 days, and the area had already been searched numerous times. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh, and it matches up perfectly with Richard Allen's 9mm. I mean, it's like a Koberger knife. It's even flimsier than the Koberger knife. You know what I mean? Like, it's that ridiculous. That's what I'm saying. Like, Richard Allen's getting it worse than Koberger is from the local authorities. I just think for people to imply that other municipalities are not involved in some similar activities relative to the Smiley Face Killer stuff, I just think that's ridiculous. I think it's very obvious to me that there's a lot of jurisdictions that are not upholding the law or objectively adhering to their duties in the process of the law. So places like Austin, I think, is a great example when they're not even they're finding bodies in Ladyburg Lake and on the shoreline of Ladyburg. One instance, not even in the water, literally on the shoreline, and they won't even tell anybody. They say he drowned, but they won't tell anybody who it is. And that's actually, I got a video here in our discussion I'll pull up here, where Kevin Gannon, one of the original detectives who developed the Smiley Face Killer theory, he's actually down there in Austin last year at the site of this location where like the day after they discovered this body, looking at some of the graffiti on the tree. Because I think one of the things I often see online here these days, folks of the interwebs on various forums and, again, videos that I've seen, the coverage of the Smiley Face Killers, they discount the whole graffiti aspects. I mean, from moment one, the original detectives clearly indicated to the media that the smiley face symbol was one of roughly a dozen symbols that they see in various uses and various, not every dozen is at every site, just, variations of that dozen being at different sites that they've located. And I think that's one of the things that's often quickly looked over here, is that it's not just a smiley face symbol. And Kevin Gannon, again, is looking at the site in Austin, and there's a 666 there. There's an inverted cross. I've been to sites in Ohio where I've seen swastikas. I've seen pentagrams.
Lisa, did you take pictures yourself? She actually, when she was
I did.
There, she did. She went around and took pictures, and there was some interesting graffiti.
Yeah. Very interesting graffiti. I didn't see any 666 or anything like that. But one of the things that whenever I heard that there was a body that had been turned up, I immediately went down to the lake and walked the entire trail. And one of the freshest graffiti was the word smile. And as the E comes out, it has like a happy face on it, right? And I took pictures of it and whatever. And it was near where the body was found. I mean, I wouldn't say like right exactly over the site, because they had that sectioned off or cornered off. But one of the things with the trail itself that people don't realize, and maybe if you live there, you do know, is that there is a group of volunteers that go around the trail and they basically repaint over any graffiti every Wednesday or every one day a week or something like that. And so whatever graffiti had been there is going to be painted over. You won't see it for long. And so you literally have to be on the lookout or aware or somehow, by by chance be in the area to see it, because you won't see it for long. They will paint over it. And again, I don't think that is like a complicit thing. I don't know. I'm not going to say yes or no because I don't know. But if I was making graffiti and I wanted to leave a symbol and I knew it was going to be painted over, you know, how convenient, right? Nothing's left there, or the evidence is just, you know, like quickly like revealed and then it's washed away.
Kind of like even if the
victims.
You know, that's a great point, because even if the local government wasn't complicit, they're still going to be happy that the graffiti's gone, because then the folks aren't going to be asking questions. Folks aren't going to be looking for it. So, then no one's butt hurt in City Hall when that graffiti's removed.
Right. And there is graffiti that is harder to get to, that you will look at and you're like, wow, that's really bizarre graffiti. And so I will say that it's, you know, you kind of need to be looking, you need to be knowing what you're looking for, and then kind of just be on the lookout, be aware of what is going on, what is current, what didn't you see? And the thing is, I would go running on the trail a lot, and so oh, that's new, I didn't see that yesterday, or oh, that's new, I didn't, you know, see that this weekend or something. So, I think it's
frequently being tagged every day then, huh? That trail area.
Well, yeah, that definitely, there's a lot of graffiti activity going on weekly. Hence why the volunteers will go out and clean, because it is a highly graffitied park area. And the graffiti's nice. I mean, don't think that it's all like grotesque or anything like that. I mean, some of the stuff is like great art, and you're like, wow, they really painted over that, because that was actually really good. But well,
the example I have with Kevin Gannon, it's not very artistic. It is very rudimentary.
No, I know. Yeah.
There. Which I think that is a good one. I think that's a great point, is delineation between someone actually doing graffiti art versus the markings of this cult, which seem to just be quickly scrawled, you know, messages to one another, essentially.
What, if I may interject, P. Thomas? Sure. There was, I believe it was in 2022, with Jason John, after his body was found, they had a movement to install cameras. And I think it was discovered that there are cameras out there, except either they weren't working, or from what I understood was that the perpetrators who may have picked up some of these victims or disposed of the bodies of these victims somehow evaded the line of sight of these cameras.
Sure.
So they are aware of where these cameras are being put up. And I think that there was a whole huge forum that was saying the cameras aren't going to matter. It's still going to happen because the cameras are out there, and these people know where the cameras are, and they're staying out of sight with these cameras. And so again, something is something. I totally get that. But I think even the family members were saying cameras aren't enough. It's still happening. So,
no, for sure. And there's countless examples of that last frame of an individual walking on some CCTV footage where they're last seen. Again, William Ramsey's documentary is full of those instances where, again, capturing the scope of all these people, you know, they're seen on CCTV walking through a town square, and then that's their last image of them. Because, the perpetrators do seem to know where the cameras are. I think that's a great point there brought up by P. Thomas. I appreciate those statements there, Lisa, because I think my personal take on it is the perpetrators of these crimes are using some sort of electronic device in which to detect security cameras. I think that's very difficult in which to even probably make, let alone, for someone so electronically inclined, because it's no different than you can buy like on Amazon, like a $10 detector for cameras or bugs in like a hotel room, right? Detect those things. So it's that same style of technology or device on a slightly larger scale with a slightly bigger battery, I presume.
Well, I mean, and just alone, like with the cameras that are in the bars of where the actual victims were, those bars are heavily, they have cameras in there at all angles. And yet when the family goes in there and requests the cameras, because I think the detectives will go in there and request the cameras. And there has been instances, and this, I believe Lori Faber was the one that kind of brought this to light. And then digging, you kind of start to see that this was the case, that the detectives were looking on the wrong day of when that person was in there, and they're like, oh, we didn't see anything. And we're like, well, of course not, because he wasn't there. That wasn't the correct day when they were looking, or when they requisitioned the film. or the footage. Sorry.
And then the other though, right? You know what I mean? If they give them the wrong day, they're like, oops.
Absolutely. And then the other thing is that the families will then go ahead and follow up and try to request for the video, and the actual bar owners or whomever it is, it will take them months and months to give them video. And when they give them video, it's the wrong day or it's the wrong time. Or
Yeah,
it's the wrong
I've seen that down. It's like, come on.
And it's like, well, if
the first day I didn't know.
Exactly. And so, or the cameras weren't working that day, or they weren't working that hour specifically when the guy walked in and took a drink and then somehow mysteriously disappeared and then ended up in the river a week later. And so there is definitely some nefarious stuff going on. If it seems to follow, at least in the pattern, the victims that do end up in the river, that these unfortunate series of evidence is nowhere to be found.
Oh, absolutely.
And one thing that I would like to mention, going back to the whole ME thing, you were talking about with some of the Ohio stuff, and you were talking about Idaho, and let me rephrase that. You were talking about some of the Idaho stuff, and then you were talking about some of the stuff with the rune, what is it called? Killings and stuff like that. And it seems like these people that are being fingered to, take the fall, it doesn't add up. And it almost seems manufactured. Now, with one of the episodes that we covered, and we looked into some of the medical examiners on the cases, especially the one in Cincinnati or Ohio or something like that. One of them, the medical examiner is an expert witness in some of these high-profile cases. And when I say high-profile cases, I'm talking about Derek Chauvin. I'm talking about some of the other ones where the actual husband murdered the wife, and it just all like it was interesting because that there was more to the story than what had happened. And so when you have these expert witnesses who are also expert witnesses, when you have these medical examiners doing the autopsies of these victims that are found drowned, and then you see what their, I guess, day-to-day, court proceedings are and where they appear, it just seems odd. And it's almost like, how did this person be the actual expert witness in Derek Chauvin, and yet they also conducted the autopsy on, what is it, Jared Dion? And you're just like, why? That just seems odd. Or if you go into Austin, you see the medical examiners down there, you notice that some of the medical examiners had been in litigation for illegally transporting organs or illegally falsifying autopsy reports. Something like, I think one of the family members requested an autopsy report, and they looked at it and they said, why is there a spleen weight when my brother had his spleen removed 10 years ago? Yeah. So things like that. And when you see
to this question, I think, were autopsies actually performed on all victims? Because sometimes I think they're just making shit up with some of these cases.
So great question, someone, in that most of what I found, most of the autopsies are not conducted, or they are reported as there wasn't a reason to conduct an autopsy. And so there's that the ME will not conduct one just because he didn't find grounds to. Sorry about that. And then some of the tox screens will report just alcohol. The family members will then take it upon themselves to go ahead and collect samples or collect whatever and seek out a second opinion. And that's when most of the information will come from the actual second opinion of these medical examiners.
Yep.
At least in Austin, because I've kept up most of those.
That's happened in a lot of cases. A case here I want to compare here tonight here is Dakota James out of Pittsburgh. And he upon second review of an autopsy that his family hired, they got Cyril Wecht there, the former medical examiner, and a guy who's fairly infamous amongst medical examiners. He reviewed that, and they had his body tested for and Cyril Wecht concluded it was a homicide, and they had his body is presumably his liver, I suppose, right, tested for GHB, and he tested positive for GHB. So there are, I mean, it seems, again, I've never seen all these reports, but based upon the apparent factual data surrounding a lot of these second autopsies done by families, more oftentimes than not, it seems that GHB is detected in these cases. So, Riley Strain was another one, I believe, that rings true for as well. His family got a second autopsy, which seems to indicate, far more, malicious intent in his death than simply falling into the water. And I believe also detected GHB.
Well, and one of the things I think that people should also mention, again, it is at the discretion of the ME to test for things, right? If you're not testing for it, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just that it wasn't tested for. And I think when you do run a full tox panel, what they're starting to see is a cocktail. It's not just GHB. It is also antihistamine. It is an anti-anxiety. And then it is, something like that. So it's not just one thing if you test for it, right? Or if you report it, how's that?
GHB, what is GH? It's GHB, not GHP there, P. Thomas. But yeah, it's the quote unquote date rape drug. But yes. Lisa have a better explanation than me. I can simply describe the details.
I do want to add in, back in the day, believe it or not, I don't know if it still is now, was even a drug highly used in the rave scene.
I think it still is, yeah.
Yeah, you'd see DJ Kyoki up on stage with like a squirt bottle, squirting the shit into his mouth as he's playing. It's like, what?
And it's big in the bodybuilding scene, which is what was occurring when Joey LaBute, one of the other case that I want to compare to Dakota James, when he disappeared. It was during the Arnold Classic in Columbus, Ohio, which is the largest bodybuilding conference.
And Nick, I think you had said that
Bigabun.
That's right. Okay. Yes.
What were you saying, Lisa?
No, that I believe in the series, you and Nick were talking about how GHB is very big in the bodybuilding industry or sector or whatever. And yes, it is popular in the gay community as well. It's popular in the rave scene as well. That's one of the other things, is that in Austin, there is an underground tunnel that has a huge rave scene. And apparently there's a lot of drugs that are being passed around there. Or, at least that is what the word is. But just to kind of give you a little bit of a whatever, I don't know if you were going to bring that up, but so GHB is the gamma hydroxybutyrate. And basically what it does is it kind of depresses your nervous system, and it brings you all the way down to where you are compliant, so to speak, right? And that's kind of what the whole rape drug thing. But the reason that it's been used for, sorry, my contacts, but the reason it's been used as a drug is because of the feeling of euphoria and relaxation and all that other stuff, which goes along with that, feeling offline, because your nervous system is kind of depressed. It's kind of, and when I say depressed, I mean like kind of desensitized, so to speak.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a great explanation. This is on that same topic. I stumbled across this recently because I've long suspected, and again, I think this is somewhat how this phenomenon has evolved. And let me just make this point real quick, Nick, and I'll let you. I don't want to jam you up there. But yeah, this is something I never considered, that GHB was being mixed with lubricants, and this was a warning in UK about the gay community being sent out to the gay community. Essentially, there's a BuzzFeed article about it, but it was essentially a warning sent out to all the gay community in the UK, saying like, we've gotten all these cases of someone spiking lubricants. It's with like GHB and GBL.
Come on.
And I thought, well, wait a second. Is it transdermal? But I don't think it's transdermal that they're getting it in there. It's just through the anus, I believe, is the entryway to the bloodstream quicker than the stomach, so to speak, there. So, or the eyeball is that DJ was using it. So it seems like GHB can be applied to numerous factors, but it seems that it's being used, at least in the UK. This is from 2019. And again, I hadn't even considered it because, like, especially as the phenomenon has evolved to include a lot of gay men, like I hadn't even considered, well, maybe they're getting the drugs somewhere else than drinking it. You know what I mean? But it seems like
I knew, not that I never did, but there was people that I knew, not like they weren't friends, but knew amongst the rave scene. People would admit, oh yeah, I stick a fucking ecstasy up my ass like a suppository instead. Said it hits you a lot faster and more intense.
Sure. No, and I think
science, and I was like, yeah, that's great. I'm still just gonna take mine orally. Yeah, maybe I'll crush it up. know, it helps speed it up. Not put it up.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone
is doing shit for a good time. Now you got to stick shit up your ass to get high.
Well,
like it's not even like you've gone. It's you're over the line now.
I presume it's more accepted in the gay community, just cause, but that's a great point. So that's what I'm getting at. So I often consider a lot of these abductions to be just like as Sage Drownings is reminded me here that Dakota James had a previous abduction attempt roughly a week before he disappeared. And that involved men trying to throw him into a van where he'd called a friend of his who came to pick him up in front of this hotel. And 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever, he called her disoriented, didn't know where he was exactly. And as she pulls up, men are trying to throw him into this van and she interrupts it. So I oftentimes view a lot of these circumstances as that. But if it's a gay, even if it's not a gay thing, but I think even presumably given this GHB and lubricant situation, probably presumably more a gay thing. So maybe it's not as violent of an abduction, you know what I mean? Especially since folks like Dakota James or Joey the Butte, the two cases I want to compare tonight, they're both using gay dating apps when they disappeared.
So basically what you're saying is that they are being compassionate in their rape.
I mean, yeah, it seems like there may be more to that, the logistics behind the abduction than I previously presumed.
We have a whole new category for it. Sorry, that's not a laughing matter. I'm not trying to.
I'm looking at the shit in the chat.
No.
That's funny.
They call it parachuting.
I did want to say something. This will bring it back to a more serious note. I mean, now this does kind of get like a little conspiratorial, and honestly, unfortunately, you probably need a whole lot of a backstory from where, really, and again, this is really more of Lisa's findings. When it even comes to like these drug cocktails, if you start looking at these types of style of drug cocktails, that sometimes these people like they might be found with something like GHB, or then there might be some sort of like amphetamine, but then like some sort of like antihistamine thing, or these weird drug concoctions that if you kind of start looking at these things that are being mixed, it's almost very, very much, because I'm just going to, preface it this way too. I don't know if people really know kind of the beginnings of MK Ultra, but it was very much just like injecting people with drugs to try to get the truth out of them, or just to get shit out of them. And if you start looking at their cocktail style things that started to kind of work, it almost seems very much the same. And then like,
I can see the comparison.
And then with Austin, now you're starting to like, there were some people that were involved with, skull the brain or whatever technology, weird shit. And it's
the DARPA dude's son was one of the victims, right? Wasn't one of the victims' fathers?
Yes, he was.
An executive at DARPA?
Yes, he was.
And you had to show one of these like MK Ultra cocktails and these people who are associated with the government or weird things.
Well, that's some great points, Nick, because speaking of other drugs, that this one mentioned here in the article, GBL, which Lisa may be able to speak more to it. I just have recently been familiar with it. It's apparently it's a really common chemical on like nail polish removers, I believe that's what it was, some sort of cosmetics. However, when ingested, it metabolizes into GHB. So people may not even be manufacturing GHB; they may just be acquiring this GBL substance.
Yeah. Go ahead, Lisa.
No, just really quick. If it can be absorbed through the skin, then GHL would be ideal, because you can basically say, hey, let me polish your nails. And then all of a sudden it's absorbed into your, dermis, and then it gets metabolized into GHB, and no one would be the wiser, right? Sorry.
Sure.
You can even give somebody like a wet nap. Like anything.
A what?
Yeah. Like, and to speak to this comment here about I mean, it definitely opens up a lot of avenues, right?
You never know. It's just weird. Like, no, just how easily that could be done. You just have to get like a liquid just on somebody's fingertips for a few seconds.
Sure.
But what I was gonna say is that over in in the Austin cases, there was a
great question.
There was a Jake's Fireworks that I think I had found that was like a company that was like pumping out GHB like under a fireworks company. I mean, they might have actually sold fireworks too. I don't know, but like they was like selling nationwide like GHB. And then I think something came up where there was another case. Besides that, there was these chicks driving around, these 2 girls that were robbing dudes by dosing them with some kind of antihistamine, some other like kind of concoction. It was like over-the-counter drugs that if you mix them together, you got the motherfucker all weird. And then there was something else that like I didn't know, but I ended up finding out because of doing that. I think the GBL, whatever you're saying, the GBL, I think it breaks, your body ends up breaking it down into GHB, basically. I think or something, or converts it into something close to that. And
which it's a lot more options that way, right? I mean, as far as the drugs and the applications, and
well, it's a way to get away around GHB testing.
Yeah. It's a good point.
You know, that's kind of like, almost the same thing with like why there are problems with like K2. You know, you're making a synthetic version that won't pop for something else but gives you very close effects. You know, it's the same exact thing. They were just trying to stick around with marijuana.
I think that Delta 8 and Delta 9 stuff, I think you do pop for THC with that stuff, even though it's not technically the same THC, right? It's the way it's metabolized into the body that creates that. So I think that's a very similar comparison to something that's legal. It kind of does, once metabolized, has a the hallucinogenic or high effects, if you will.
Right.
But on this comment here about the Diddy case, that's really what brought me down this rabbit hole here of looking at the GHB lubricants, because apparently that's what Diddy had. That's the word on the streets, at least, is that the Diddy was all those thousands of bottles of baby oil and lubricant were actually some sort of lube GHB combo, according to TikTok conspiracy theories. And I was like, wow, is that even a thing? Because again, I didn't realize that you could be applying GHB other than just ingesting it, right? Like drinking it, or like you said, squirting it in your eye or something. But yeah,
right.
Apparently this is a thing. Like these are, so to speak to the availability of GHB, which previous comment I had up there was talking about how it's in small circles. I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's readily available to to folks in this network who maybe want it available, right? Like, they're maybe it is a small network, right? But they can get large volumes of it. Apparently, it seems, because it's a lot of lube and GHB, if you ask me.
And don't underestimate people trying to make things better. So if there's a way that they can find to make it more absorbable just from the skin or whatever, I'm sure they can find a way. And yes, get on hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah.
I do want to add real quick about this stuff with Diddy. I mean, because I do think like it does sound a little bit silly, but I do wonder about all those bottles. This is just from my own experience. Back in the day, I've mentioned before that, I've sold steroids and went to prison for it. I was receiving shit. I think it was from like Moldova, and they would send shit in like base. I mean, I'm thinking it was part of the way it worked, but like they would label the shit that they're sending you some like pretty outlandish like shit that honestly you'd probably rather like if you were living with somebody and they grabbed the mail, you'd probably rather them find steroids than find what this bottle is going to be labeled, because it's going to label something like one of gay lube oil, legit gay lube oil on it. So it's like, I've seen and experienced fake labeling to cover other drugs. So
are you sure you didn't get a Diddy shipment on accident? Like you inadvertently got a Diddy shipment? Gay lube oil?
Fuck, I thought that was Trembolone and I was shooting that shit up.
Oh, shoot.
Oh, man. But like, because when I heard that, I was like, come on, that's a little silly. But then I was like, but I have actually experienced seeing things being sent to me labeled something else, and it was illegal. So you never know.
Sure. That's a solid point there, Nick. I think a lot of things get mailed and shipped places that no one really has any visibility on from a law enforcement perspective. I think drugs is what keeps the U.S. Postal Service in business. Is what I'm getting at. I got a clip here. So this GHB thing has been going on the entire time with this phenomenon. I got a clip here from the original press conference from the original detectives Gannon and team, and they're talking about GHB. This is back in 2008. So this isn't like a new aspect of the phenomenon, but I think it has evolved in possibly the application and how they're drugging folks. Whereas a lot of these original men, to the best of everyone's understanding and knowledge, were heterosexual. and they were seemingly drugged by dropping it in their drinks, is what the leading theory was. But again, until very recently, I was unfamiliar with this whole GHB lube situation, so it opens up a lot of avenues. But yeah, I got about a minute long clip here. I wanted to play here, and we'll talk about this clip here.
GHB. How many of the 40 cases that you mentioned today were checked for those drugs, and what were the conclusions?
I think some of the individuals, when the majority were not. I can't give you a specific number. I know after in lacrosse, when they were getting up to 6 or 7, I think when the last 1 or 2, Luke Coleman and somebody else probably were tested for it, didn't have GHB or any of the other drugs in them. But Lucas Holman is not one of the individuals that we have in our pattern, but he did drown in lacrosse. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the big.
So yeah, I mean this is not a new aspect of phenomenon. I mean this is 2008. I don't think really anything has been done to alleviate this aspect of the victimization of of these crimes. Like men today aren't more cognizant, I don't think, of that their drugs might be their drinks might be drugged, or their lubricants might be drugged, apparently, according to other reports.
Well,
but again, I think it's one of the factors that should be considered, and one of the most important factors to me is the understanding that this is going on here with this phenomenon. Because again, to say that there's not a phenomenon would be ignoring the mass amount of men that have been drugged in these circumstances as well. Let alone because not every one of them are victimized and murdered. I mean, some of them are just drugged. There have been survivors.
Yes. Do you know what I find weird, and it's probably how that one probably works great. I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, not to like sound whatever, but like if you're already using the lube, your defenses are probably already down.
Sure.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know
like,
that
I can
that's...
see how that. No, but I'm just saying if it was used that way because you actually wanted to do something even worse to the person afterwards, I mean, I would think that at that point, that person is pretty trusting of you at that point anyway. So that is an interesting way to try to do it.
I was gonna say, maybe they gave it to him as like anti-hemorrhoidal cream or something.
Yeah, that's what it was.
They were just trying to be a friend.
Yeah.
I looked it up real quick because we had a discussion about it being a supplement or whatever, and I was like, oh, I remember that, and I never looked it up.
Sure.
But so GHL, just I found this on the internet. GHL is a prodrug to GHB, and it increases sleep-related growth hormone secretion. And in the fitness industry, growth hormone is the hormone that you want because that is basically what makes you grow, right? At night when you sleep, like your recovery drug. And so it was sold as a nutritional supplement for a while until it was banned by the FDA.
Well, that's interesting because the FDA doesn't ban a lot of supplements.
Mm-mm.
They're usually pretty liberal with what they let go.
Yeah, well, they really don't care about supplements, I don't think, unless it's like an actual like a good one. Yeah, they'll start curbing that one.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. So I want to compare two. No, I appreciate that. Those thoughts there, Lisa. So one individual in recent years that has been confirmed again, by a medical examiner to be a homicide, despite the county medical examiner not wanting to hear it, was Dakota James. He disappeared back on March, I believe it was March 6th of 2017, and he was gone for I believe 40 days, if I'm not mistaken. But he again meets all the standard SFK kind of victimization or victimology. He's but and again, as we've discussed tonight, this is an individual who was last seen on CCTV footage, kind of just walking normally through a city. Allegedly only had a couple drinks, 2 or 3 drinks over a few hours. Was reported to be on a I believe Grindr or some other kind of gay dating app. I'm not sure if they specified. I believe they just said he was a gay man on a dating app. Nonetheless, these are all attributes of the Dakota James disappearance and murder. Similarly, on March, so he was recovered. So he disappeared in January. He was recovered in March. 2017. However, 200 miles away and a year prior, Joey LaBute fits the same details in Columbus, Ohio. He was not tested for GHB. However, I'm not saying he didn't test positive. It's not publicly known, at least. Columbus PD, though, did not rule his death an accidental drowning. They ruled it unknown circumstances. So they technically it's still an open investigation, technically. My understanding, no one's investigating it, but it's on paper an open investigation. So that would be the same as like Chris Jenkins from like Halloween, I believe 2002 in Minneapolis, St. Paul. His death was ruled I believe a homicide, like an open homicide. So, but I don't think anyone's really, to my understanding, investigating that crime either. But these are some of the cases that, were Joey LaBute. Still an open investigation leads me to believe that he probably did test positive for GHB, similar to Chris Jenkins, who again was ruled a homicide. I think the police know they just have certain political constraints for whatever reason, whether it be not to alert the public or alarm the public or whatever it is. They're part of it, the shenanigans and malfeasance and criminal activities, perhaps. But whatever it is, whatever their sticking point is, they have a sticking point. But I think these deaths between Dakota James and Joey LaBute are very similar in nature. The victims were very similar in appearance. Again, they're both confirmed using gay dating apps. And I say gay, my highlight is on the gay dating side again, because I think there are heterosexual men who have disappeared using heterosexual dating apps and found victimized in the same capacity as these men. However, I think the gay community is far more rampant with this activity, is what this phenomenon has evolved to today. That's my opinion, just from looking at some of the victims in like Chicago or even Austin. There's been a couple that fit this description. Again, these two individuals, 200 miles apart and a year apart, essentially a year apart, Dakota James to Joey LaBute. Again, they look alike. They disappear under the similar circumstances. They're gone. They're missing 24 days and 40 days respectively. Found drowned. Again, one's confirmed a homicide, but both essentially confirmed a homicide. I mean, the unknown death of Joey LaBute, unknown cause of death, is essentially saying like we think it's a homicide. Again, Dakota James has been confirmed of that. But speaking,
oh my God, I'm really sorry. I'm seeing this in the stage drownings. He said something about like the wordplay with the streets. There was something that I even started noticing because there was
Cincinnawa. Yep.
Yeah. There was something where because of the Lake Ronkonkoma over by me, has been known for always having a male drowning every year, because like the lake, the girl of the lake is jealous that she couldn't marry her white. She had a thing for a white dude, and she was an Indian. She couldn't marry him, and now she's going to take a white dude to be spiteful every year. That and that was like the explanation. That was a good enough explanation for everybody. I remember as a kid, for like why this kid drowned. Oh, it just happened, and it must have been like the Indian in the lake. Oh, okay. Who knows what the fuck they were now? But
no, that's a good. It's a good point. It's a good comment, because I'm actually going to bring that up here since Cincinnawa stuff.
There was a street over there that I noticed was popping up around other ones that we covered. I can't. It might have been Lake Street or something like that, and I was like, "What the fuck?" Like I had noticed,
or possibly Water Street.
Maybe it's that. But I know when I saw that comment, it made me remember, because I think even showed Lisa about it. So yeah, it was very weird. I was like, yo, we might have even mentioned it to somebody else who was on our show, but not for that topic. I think, Lisa, if you remember correctly, after we had somebody on for like the 666 in CERN, I forgot his name.
Yes.
Yeah, we kind of told him about that, and I think he was even saying there was something up with certain street names actually even catching in the area.
Yes,
it was weird.
Yes, and that there was almost like a finger pointing to potential predicting of the next one, like when you looked at some of these. And this whole Cincinnawa, I believe it I wish I had this fresh in my memory, but I don't. But I believe either it was scribbled next to a body, and then like I don't remember how long after, there was someone that ended up being disposed of near Cincinnawa Street, or disappeared.
There's actually been, you're spot on there, Lisa. There's actually been 2 victims there in East Du Bois, Iowa. I'm sorry, Illinois, right across from Du Bois, Iowa. Matt Kruzicki, which was supposed to be before in a comment, and there's been a more recent victim over there as well. But yeah, and if you can put a pin in that, and the topic of Cincinnawa, we'll get back to that here in a minute, because That's one of the factors and elements that caused me to go down the whole mound theory relative to some of these, and how I helped develop my human sacrifice, the modern day ritual sacrifice I think that is occurring here with the Smiley Face Killer murders. And I saw a comment earlier asking how many of these men are the firstborn. I think that's a great question, because I know off the top many of them are, and I think because I've done that analysis relative to this concept of applying the ancient biblical kind of human sacrifice thing that were at sites where in ancient times here in America, these human sacrifices were occurring at these sites where these men are now dying today under the Smiley Face Killer phenomenon. So there is probably something more to that, but
there's definitely some, but not all. Just FYI on that. But they are probably the most educated in their family. I will say that.
That's a good point too.
Yes.
Which may be a preceding factor, whether or not they're intelligent or not, versus they're just firstborn. So yeah, I think those are all very important factors to consider. But here, back to, if we can just put a pin on the Cincinema stuff, because I can start talking Mount stuff all day. But if we get, we'll get back to that here in a minute, though. Some great comments there from the chat, and I appreciate those comments there, Lisa. That's some good factors to consider. But as we see here, Dakota James, this is one of the last known images of him. Again, the people that perpetrated this crime, they knew where the cameras were. They knew he was just out of any shot of any camera, because the next thing, this little square area goes into like an alleyway and into some bridges down to like a water street. So, there's very limited space he could have disappeared in this area. So obviously the perpetrators knew where the cameras were. And I think that's an important factor. Again, in the Joey LaBute disappearance, he was seen leaving a bar on his phone on a gay dating app in the same capacity as Dakota James here. And again, in an area where there's a lot of cameras, but somehow they didn't detect him, being kidnapped. And again, it's a year apart, but I think it's not so much the year, but the actual dates on the calendar, right? So like, I think there may be some information gained by comparing some of these dates from the different victims. For example, Joey LaBute and Dakota James here were 200 miles apart, Columbus, Ohio, straight shot on Interstate 70 to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, essentially a straight shot, almost a straight shot, roughly 200 miles away. And again, one disappears on March 5th. The other one is recovered on essentially March 6th the following year. So both gone multiple weeks. Again, both disappear under the same circumstances. Both look a lot alike. Just, physical character, not so much identical in appearance, but physical characteristics, height, weight, hair color, these kind of things. And it's it's apparent to me that there's, especially within the game, we had some comments before about kind of the promiscuous nature of the homosexual community and the use of these apps. I think it's far more prevalent, or more. It's at least seems to have more accepted kind of attitude towards some of those some of those activities. The use of those apps, as far as the promiscuous nature of folks, seems to be more rampant in the gay apps. That's the comment we had earlier. And I think that causes these men to be easier victims, because of that, because they let their guard down, and there's that accepted nature of, because women, I don't think, and Lisa, I'm obviously not a woman, so maybe you can speak to this, but I'm not saying that you have experience on dating apps, but I'm saying women in general are more guarded in dating environments, right? I mean,
absolutely. Whereas
I don't think the men in these gay dating apps, it doesn't seem like that's the culture they're operating in. Like, they don't seem guarded. It seems very like a free, very promiscuous kind of thing. So, Joey LaBute here was, it says, I believe it's, maybe I have the wrong part of the article. They mentioned here in this article, this is an article going over his case from the Columbus Monthly periodical publication there in Columbus, Ohio. It was originally written in 2017, but updated here in 2023 for some reason. But it goes on here to discuss. Let me find it here in the article. Here's a picture to show the comparison as far as what I'm talking about. Dark hair, general same build is the fellow over there in Pittsburgh, Dakota James. So I think that, there's something that speaks to when they're so close in proximity, geographically speaking, and the victims look so similar and their circumstances are so identical. I think these are good ways to delineate the different cells of this cult that are operating, because there are different cells. There's different cults and different cells of the cult in different cities. from my estimation and my analysis, they do operate slightly different. They have different aspects of the way they perpetrate these crimes and the manner in which they're perpetrated, as far as the disposal of the bodies, the actual kidnapping of the victim, that sort of thing. But it goes on to describe, and again, looks like towards the bottom, if I'm not mistaken here, how he's using one of these apps. And again, I think that's a detail that's lost in the mess of all these details here, because that seems to be an important factor to me. But to people who write these articles, doesn't seem to be that big of a factor. But yeah, here we go. The police detective confirmed he was in the area around the bar for 2 more hours after he was last seen leaving the bar. He had some text messages and some phone calls to some friends. The text messages were largely gibberish, and the phone call allegedly said he was driving. It says, I'm driving, which that's an interesting detail since his car was found in the same spot he parked it in. So it would indicate he got into a car with somebody, which would then indicate there was foul play here. But yeah, here he goes. It says LeBute's friends, based on interviews with LeBute's friends, the police detective said LeBute may have been using a dating app at the bar. Detective Wooten said that he has looked into that possibility. And again, there's other statements by the Columbus PD saying that was in fact true. He was using it. And again, he's seen on some similar CCTV footage leaving that bar, texting on his phone, as if like Dakota James was, as if he's looking to meet somebody, right?
I think one of the important things to point out, and this may be a very bad generalization and possibly sexist, so I forewarn everyone. I never participated in a dating app. I'm too old to have participated in a dating app. I'm just going to be honest with you. But I will say that I think what happens is, growing up, like when I was in college, you are taught to be aware, to be constantly vigilant and constantly careful of your drinks. Don't go alone. Don't leave,
Sure.
Whatever, go into the bathroom with the other girls or whatever. And so I think just by that culture alone kind of predisposes us to be much more cautious and much more aware. The other thing is, I am assuming, this is a generalization, that when girls do go on dating apps or they do go to meet somebody at a bar, they're not immediately thinking we're going to hook up. This is, of course, my culture. I grew up in a small town.
Sure.
But the thing is, I think what happens in the gay community, you are looking for that. And so I think that there is a complete distinction between, I'm not saying that girls are going to the bar to look for their husband, but in some sort of way, I think sometimes girls have this romanticized, like, oh, he's going to take me to dinner and he's going to spend money on me. You know what I mean? Whereas I think in the other demographic, they're like not interested in marriage and dinner. They're just interested in something else. So I think that's a horribly bad generalization, but I think that also probably plays into the MO of why this victimology is the way it is. This is just a generalization.
No, but I think you're right. I think it's very possible that it's evolved into some of these factors because it's easier to target the victim.
And guys, yeah, and the other thing is, guys necessarily do not go in with the assumption of, I need to be guarded, I need to take care, somebody's going to kidnap me. I don't think guys grew up that way, so to speak. No. And so it's one of those things to where they do now, or they should now, really, after all this. And so I think what happens is that they are not as guarded. And so that leaves them potentially vulnerable. But one thing I was going to mention before you go on and kind of throw back to the Emmy thing was, when you talked about Joey LaBute had an actual Emmy that was somewhat an interesting dig. And the reason I say that is because she supposedly got in trouble for a couple of things. One, that she was using tax dollar monies to outsource autopsies to an actual Las Vegas pathology, or it was like a private contracting firm outside of the county that was to be performing the autopsies. And I think it was something that she claimed that it was staffing shortage, and that she had to require, kind of outsourcing. But why to Las Vegas, right? Why outsource to that one specifically from Ohio, right? It's not like it was the next, door over. But one thing that then that was one. And then the other thing was that one thing that I found that she had allegations of potentially investigators influencing the ultimate end of the autopsy report. So there was also those things that she was being, I guess, involved with. And I think she stepped down at some point, and then, the rest is history. But she was part of the actual Franklin County task force for the opiate, I think, crisis addiction or something like that. I think that was one. And then the other thing,
that's exactly what it was.
I think one of the other things that we had kind of mentioned on the show was that in her procurement of seeking out an outside agency for autopsies in Las Vegas, well, it wasn't Las Vegas, but the woman who conducted the autopsy for Dion worked in Nevada, not Las Vegas, but she did have firms
Reno,
in
I
Nevada.
believe.
Yes, it was.
Yep.
So
No,
it
that's a good
just,
point.
I don't know. It seems a little odd. Maybe a
No,
stretch, but
those are some good points there, Lisa. Yeah, it's something's going on with some of these medical examiners officers. There's no doubt about it. With that kind of activity going, outsourcing stuff that far, especially. But to answer this question here from Amy on the comment, I did an analysis of the victims in the mounds in our previous 5-part series on the Occult Rejects. But relative to the victims we're talking about here tonight, Dakota James specifically, he was found on Neville Island, just north of Pittsburgh, there in the river, and in an area searched by police the day before, probably put in the water roughly 30 minutes prior to his discovery by a woman seeing him float by her property there by Neville Island. Neville Island gets its name from Colonel Neville of the Revolutionary War, member of the Society of Cincinnati, and aide de camp to General George Washington. So that's most certainly a mound location. Much like Neville, Ohio is, which was his son's, the town his son started, Major Neville, I believe John Neville. He was aide de camp to General Lafayette, the other leader of the Society of Cincinnati from the French side. He built a town centered around a mound in Claremont County, Ohio, which is named Neville, Ohio. The town is, and it's, again, all these Society of Cincinnati founded towns were all focused on mound locations, if not completely designed around mound complexes like places like Marietta, Ohio, or Cincinnati for that matter. But yeah, there's I would recommend any folks to the interwebs to answer the question there in the comment. A lot of mound analysis in our previous series, but yeah, I'm happy to address that and go further into detail with some of those things, because I've been searching further for any sort of mound, for example, in Austin, Texas, any sort of mound surveys of the site of what is now Ladyburg Lake before they flooded it with water, because many sites across the United States, as we discussed, that U.S. Army Corps of Engineers damming project of all these different, creating all these man-made lakes, those were all flooding mound sites, I've yet to find the problem is the availability of, did anyone do a survey of that site? And in a lot of instances, with the instance of Ladyburg Lake, it doesn't seem like anyone surveyed that site, archaeologically speaking, to review the mounds prior to the flooding of it, which that has happened in numerous cases where I've found maps of Society of Cincinnati maps that have shown mounds that are now at the bottom of these lakes that were built by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers back in the 50s and 60s.
And I do know that at least in there's a conjunction out there in the heart of Austin that I believe was a major site for some of the native tribes that they would meet once a year to discuss things or to whatever. It was a popular site for some of these tribes to meet up in that area. And I believe that there was a war that actually happened with them and the people wanting to, take over Texas at some point. So I do know there was a massacre there as well. And then, like you said, it was flooded and what have you. But I do think that there was a lot of nefarious things going on, because there has been tribes here in Texas that have demanded not only the release of information, because they said that the people are, I guess, holding this information and not releasing it, but they have also requested the remains to be released back to them, to their tribes, for proper burial. And these bodies, I believe, are kept in museums that they were dug up during the construction of I-35, as well as the dammed up river.
Interesting. Yeah, that's been going on a lot, that fight with the remains. I mean, anytime there's a new construction anywhere where they come across a mound or some sort of native burial site, they do pause the activities, and due to federal laws, they oftentimes have to go do an archaeological dig and then put that stuff in a museum beforehand. But there was an instance, I believe, just out of a mound site down in San Antonio, which has been for years, the Alamo, is built on top of a mound site in San Antonio, where there were native tribes still fighting in courts down there to try to get some of the skeletons that were buried there, I believe.
Yes, that's very true.
So despite that federal law, I believe, being passed in 1991, maybe 92, it's still ongoing, seemingly still an issue today with some of these mound sites and the remnants of whatever was discovered in those mounds.
I find that mound stuff very interesting. There has to be
I do
something.
too.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think it's one of those occulted ritualistic aspects of America that's been hidden through so many different secret societies and families and bloodlines that there's the way I look at it is I'm oftentimes looking at like disparate, what seemingly is disparate factions or groups that have venerations for the mounds, but that there's got to be some connecting principle between all of these groups that venerate these mounds, in my opinion. And they may do different activities at these mounds. They may venerate them in different different capacities, but nonetheless, they all have a shared interest. Much like the ancient alien cargo cultists all operate as one, these mound people seem to congregate. You know what I mean?
Yep.
John D. Rockefeller lived near a mound in Florida. Yeah, the Federal Reserve was created on a mound via a secret ritual on an island off the coast of Georgia, Jekyll Island there. That was a Rockefeller owned home and mound. In fact, that one has been, there's been numerous archaeological digs. I believe if you go to Wikipedia, it says not an Indian mound, even though it's called Indian Mound Cottage. But if you look at the archaeological digs and surveys, it absolutely was a native mound for sure. That speaks to the political nature of these mounds. Like, it's called Indian Mound Cottage. Why would you even think about creating a story where it's not a mound if there's archaeological surveys showing that it is a mound, right?
Right. No,
it's the ridiculous nature of these mounds,
I think it also serves to whitewash it as well. You know what I mean? Like, if you can just erase that anything was there, well, guess what? The land is up for grabs, and the good Lord ain't making any more land. So,
well, it's the 1984 nature of meme world 2024 that we live in today, where don't believe your lying eyes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the relative to these dating apps, there's a corporation that seems to control the dating app world, right? That corporation is Interactive. I always get IAC. I always get their name wrong. IAC, the Interactive. What do they call themselves? I don't recall. IAC. They don't seem to have a name for IAC other than IAC. They own everything. Like, they own all that. They basically founded the Match Group, which owns like Tinder and a number of these other, I guess for lack of a better term, heterosexual dating apps. However, they own like that whole sphere of activity. And what I mean by that is this: the same IAC company owns Expedia Group, which owns like hotels.com and other let me pull it up here, other hotel properties and like hotel. So you got Expedia. Oh, that's not the right one. Give me 1 second. There we go. So what I'm getting at here is, if you book through basically any website you book a hotel through, you're really booked through IAC and Expedia.com. They own a number of other things: Hotwire, Orbitz, eBookers, Cheap Tickets, Car Rentals. Hotels.com, I believe, is another one of their websites. Yep, hotels.com. So even past that, though, what is even stranger than that, like if you go to like Priceline.com, Priceline books on the back end apparently through Expedia. I've had hotels show me this before in booking to these other things to try to understand the logistics of the situation. And as it's been described to me and shown to me on the hotel screen end of these activities, right? Everything goes through Expedia. So they kind of own that whole market. They own numerous websites, but again, even the folks that aren't within their ownership of websites, they sell rooms off to those people, kind of deal. So like if you book a room through Priceline, you're really just going through Expedia, and you're going through IAC. IAC again. So if you apply that same kind of concept to the dating world app world that they owned, and basically started and invented, which was Match Group, and Match Group owns a lot of different assets. It's not just the name like Tinder, Match.com, something called Medic, OkCupid, Hinge, Plenty of Fish, Our Time.
They pretty much, wow.
And those are just the ones listed. Here's the whole full list. I mean, there's even an LDS Planet. I mean, for the Mormons, you know what I mean? They own everything here again, and then even Tinder. So Grindr's, like my understanding, like that's the same like kind of software type of deal. The Tinder is like the Grindr's like the gay version of Tinder, right? They operate in, like, again, these people are the people that develop these software. So if you're developing something off of that software platform, you're dealing with IAC. You know what I mean? And IAC, again, is a very questionable organization, in my opinion. First of all, one of the other outlets that they own is the Daily Beast, a publication that likes to write articles saying there is no serial killer gang murdering young men across the U.S. Spoiler alert for the folks of the interwebs here on this article, with the Daily Beast asking in the headline, is a serial killer gang murdering young men across the U.S.? Spoiler alert, they conclude no, there's no serial killer gang. So the company that owns all these dating apps in the dating app world, and again, hotels, if you want to start talking like trafficking and maybe where some of these men get victimized, that even, who knows, right? You know, booking hotels all goes to the same company, this IAC, right? And they own the Daily Beast. So it seems like this is just propaganda published possibly by some of the offenders of some of these crimes, dispelling the rumors of, you know, Smiley Face Killer activities. I agree with someone's comment. Whoa.
Well, I will say this. It's interesting that big tech makes its appearance again.
There you go. Yeah. I think you've done some great analysis on the tech industry relative to this phenomenon, Lisa. And I think there's a lot more to that. And again, I look at stuff like this with the dating apps, the victims using these dating apps at the time of literally seen at the time of their disappearance by witnesses, confirmed by police, seen on video using dating apps, like, and then you have the dating app people being like, oh, there's no Smiley Face Killers. You guys are crazy. Right. Seems pretty convenient to me. And when I say this is a shady corporation, so like they started, or like they bought Expedia at some point, but it was started and developed with Microsoft, right? So like was like an IAC Microsoft joint venture, if you will. As seen here in this Google search, founded in 1996 as a division of Microsoft. Barry Diller right here, chairman and senior executive key people. That's the CEO and the guy who started IAC. Now Barry Diller is an interesting character. Not only is he deep within the Clinton orbit, including Chelsea Clinton on his board of directors for this corporation, for the IAC corporation. I saw a comment earlier in the chat tonight here about the Bronfman family. Edgar Bronfman Jr. is also a board member on the IAC corporation. So this is a guy who ran Warner Music, considering all this stuff going down in the music industry right now. This guy ran Warner Music for much of the 2000s. The heir to the Seagram's fortune, his sisters funded the NXIVM cult. You know, so super questionable board of directors, if you ask me. But it gets even more questionable when you consider who is Barry Diller. Barry Diller is the former sidekick to none other than Bob Cocaine Evans. When Bob Cocaine Evans left Paramount Pictures, this is the man he put in charge of it. Now, Bob continued to work there as a special deal, as a joint kind of co-president / producer for many years there at Paramount, from the Godfather years of the early 70s to the early 80s. That was the role he played in. And the reason he played in that role is because this is the man he put in charge of the situation. His old sidekick, Barry Diller. He kind of stepped down and put Barry Diller in charge. Barry Diller is responsible for most of TV since that time. I mean, he started things like Fox Network, USA Network. I mean, this dude's big time in TV. And again, with the IAC Corporation that he started, big in tech and dating apps and whatnot. But this is an article from just a few months ago in July. Barry Diller says Paramount pursuit might be over for IAC. So he was trying to take over Paramount from this IAC. Like, that's how powerful this dude's corporation is. He's big time. He's not by any stretch small potatoes. He's married to the former wife of the ex-wife of the prince of one of the German princes, the von Furstenbergs. That's his wife, Diane von Furstenberg.
Oh, Diane von Furstenberg. She is a huge fashion designer.
Oh, big time. But
Yeah.
I would question if the man's actually heterosexual, given things like this article from Gawker. Oh, I lost it. Give me 1 second. He's famous. Gawker famously published this this article. Barry Diller's sexy all boy Thanksgiving. Apparently, he had a private island somewhere, I believe, in the South Pacific, with a bunch of young boys or young men instead of clearly half clothed men, instead of celebrating Thanksgiving with his wife Diane von Furstenberg. So dude, this was
2010?
this was a while ago. Yeah, this is November 2010 was this article.
Well, it's interesting because I bet he joined forces with Peter Thiel when Peter Thiel basically slaughtered and annihilated Gawker.
That was my thoughts exactly, for sure. This is right before the Peter Thiel outing.
When you brought up,
I don't think anyone knew Barry Diller was gay at that time. You know what I mean? What were you saying, Nick?
I said when you brought up Daily Beast before, like I knew it was Gawker that was the situation, but for some reason when I saw the news, I was like, Peter Thiel. I don't know. It was just weird because the stuff with him. I do think.
He's a lot of weird stuff. Yeah. A lot of weird stuff with that guy, right?
Very much, yes.
Very much so.
So again, I just want to reiterate that without Barry Diller, there wouldn't be these dating apps, right? Like, he was very integral from the onset of this match group. He was at one point questioned how much does he own of some of these properties, because again, it's before, like, if these things aren't publicly traded companies and some of them aren't, then it's a matter of there's no public right to know who owns what of a privately owned company. And at certain times, some of these companies are privately owned versus publicly owned. For example, 23andMe is going through that right now. Recently, their entire board quit, and apparently that was over the fact that they're trying to go back private from being a public company. So, and Elon Musk did the same thing, I believe, a few years ago with his Tesla corporation. So these things do occur, but that's what I'm saying. So, like, when it's a private company, it's hard to know who owns what. But Tinder is the highest grossing non-gaming app worldwide. Again, if it wasn't, and again, Diller owned this. This is back in 2020 where they spun Match Group off. So it's not like he doesn't own it anymore, right? He just spins these things off, right? So eventually Expedia got spun off into its own entity, from IAC. Match Group got complete full separation. So they still own portions of this, but now it's somewhat obfuscated because they've spun it off into its own entity away from the publicly traded corporation. And he's quoted as saying, even after Tinder was spun off, that he owned he said he owned more than 60% and less than 95%. Kind of a smart ass response to how much you own of a company, but that's where we're at with Barry Diller.
It's like, oh, thank. It's kind of a wide.
It's kind of crazy to me that somebody like this is so involved in these dating apps when these dating apps are clearly being used to victimize some of these men.
I mean, oh wow. I mean, that could lead to so much, though, too. Like knowing so much people's private lives.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, it could be. That's a great blackmail device, right? Oh, big time.
I was thinking of
big time.
Well, I mean, it seems like if they own all of the vacation rental booking agencies, and then they own all of the dating apps, and then what did you say about 23andMe?
So they don't. I just use that as an example. They don't own 23andMe, but I use that as an example showing like these companies go private, public, private. It's not exactly abnormal, but yeah.
I mean, I will say
there may be some connections there. I'd have to look now.
I do feel like most of these apps basically run for the sole purpose of data collection. They want to basically data mine anything and everything that they possibly can. 23andMe is the same thing, except it doesn't mine your data, it just mines your DNA. And so one of the interesting things as a tangent, one of the interesting things with 23andMe is that it was owned by Ann Wojcicki, and Ann Wojcicki is Susan Wojcicki's sister. Susan Wojcicki was the CEO of YouTube, who recently died of cancer. And I believe Susan was married to Sergey Brin, who was the founder of Google. So I
think Ann was an early CTO there as well, I believe.
Yes,
when they were in the garage, the garage version of Google.
Mm-hmm. And so all of this is like data mining, in my opinion.
Sure.
So if
on that note, you got Maxwell's sisters and brother-in-law involved in the early creation of search engines.
Yes, exactly. And so if you think about, if you kind of tag most of these victims that are found, a large majority of them are in the tech industry.
Yeah. There's definitely a growing number. There's definitely a growing number there. Well, if I got a couple more points here, I'm going to follow back up on that Sensenawa point here from earlier by watching the quick clip of this. Again, back to the original onset. These aren't new details necessarily. These are things that people have somewhat forgotten, I think, or just often ignore when they're determining this is not a real phenomenon or these aren't real murders or whatever else. Were some of those factors involved, like that Sensenawa factor. I think that was an important factor again in this entire narrative of the cult ritualistic activities. And I got a clip here from the original CNN coverage of this case back in 2008 and the original detectives.
Focused on where a body was recovered. Gannon and Duarte wanted to know where the body went in. If they could figure out that location, the detectives believed they'd find their crime scene. In city after city, at that crucial spot, they say they'd find this symbol, a smiley face. They found one in Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and in Iowa. They all look different, but the detectives are convinced it's the killer's 6th signature. In Michigan, near a drowning, the detectives discovered graffiti they believed was written by the killers, but were puzzled by a word they hadn't seen before.
We found Sensenawa, which to us was very suspicious at the time.
The detectives found it again, hundreds of miles away. They were in Iowa, investigating the drowning of 24-year-old Matt Krzyzewski. Bloodhounds tracked his scent to an intersection near the Mississippi River. The detectives believe that is the location where the killer slid Krzyzewski in the water. It's Sensenawa Avenue.
And we believe they were.
So yeah, that's some interesting details on how I got kind of started on looking at some of the mound aspects. Not only seeing some of the same sites as being like, I'm visiting sites that are both mound sites and SFK victim sites. I went back and looked at the original details of their investigation. And they go into some further details on the Sensenawa topic in the case studies and drowning forensics book. But yeah, I think there is something to it. Sensenawa, again, is relative to the Krzyzewski crime scene. That was the name of the creek that he was found at the confluence of where that creek or river, small river, met the Mississippi River. And the reason it's named Sensenawa is because the start of that river or creek begins in Sensenawa, Wisconsin, like roughly 100 miles away, 80 miles away to the north, at Sensenawa Mound, which was named for, it's a rattlesnake mound. There's different variations of the interpretation of the word Sensenawa from different tribes. The one that seems most relative to the circumstances surrounding these mounds and the construction of them and why they were named these things is rattlesnake mound. But there's been another victim. So on the note of Matt Krzyzewski there in Du Bois, again, there's been another victim at that same location, found right near, right down the stream a little bit further than Krzyzewski's body was recovered, but may have been dumped at the same location. I think oftentimes, in my opinion, was. So this other victim disappeared from a bar just up the road off of Sensenawa Avenue, much like Krzyzewski. And again, Krzyzewski was located in like a gravel pit area, again, at the confluence of Sensenawa River or Creek in the Mississippi River. And that would have been the prime location for a mound site. And a lot of mound sites today along riverways are, been turned into gravel pits and other stone quarries and whatnot, because this is land not used for anything else. It's oftentimes land that's flooded very easily, so it's not used. It's in a floodplain, so it's not often used for buildings or homes or anything like that. So golf courses, gravel pits, these kind of things are what a lot of these mound sites are today. But they're in East Tippecanoe, Illinois, I think, is a very important aspect of what's going on relative to Cincinnati. Multiple victims at that location, and it's not it's a fairly remote area. It's not a highly populated area, not a major highway throughput like some of the other major interstates.
JJ, I was going to ask you a little bit off tangent. They mentioned the graffiti again, and I forgot to ask you for it. Didn't Gannon say something about that each town had their own pattern of graffiti? That
Absolutely.
When they saw the graffiti, that it was usually typical of that location, almost
Absolutely,
as like a fingerprint of the location.
Their own dialect.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what went on. And I got a clip here on that note, in fact, that I want to share with you all relative to the one I mentioned earlier with Gannon visiting Austin and seeing some of that other graffiti outside of the smiley face at some of the site.
And
that's a great point.
He's never released.
No, not to my knowledge.
They are.
No, not to my knowledge. No, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, but not to my knowledge. No, nothing was been released. I mean, I've seen some other symbols that I've communicated with folks like Jim Smith and I have communicated over the years. William Ramsey's investigator in his documentaries and Smiley Face Killer research. He and I have shared some symbols that he and I have seen, stuff he's seen in Georgia, stuff. So I've seen it at sites in Ohio of actual incidents of, these weren't victims and murders that occurred 10 or so, dozen years prior. These were, contemporary to the disappearance and recovery of these victims. Did both, that's when Jim Smith and I have shared some of these symbols that we've seen. And again, the ones I've seen, I've commented on saying, swastikas and a pentagram, which have led to me to conclusions like, some sort of, Nazi satanic element to these murders. And right. I think those are the cult ritual aspects, is somebody that has those factors involved in their cult network.
Something I think Crowley one time mentioned like the smiling face in the sky or something like that. But one thing that I do, this is just my opinion. I could be wrong. I mean, I know everything. A lot of symbolism that seems to pop up, even with like the true crime, Delphi.
Yep.
And some of those symbols that are popping up, and other symbols sometimes, the symbology that you'll see with certain crimes, that symbol itself to me even represents the death part of the magical experience.
Oh, like interesting.
Symbol of death regardless, in a sense.
How so?
I found that very interesting. Times that I've noticed over and over again. I'm like, I would equate that with like the death before the rebirth for a symbol or an experience. So I found that, yeah. I don't know how any other.
You think that's probably a commonly accepted like symbol or understanding of that symbol?
Well, if I'm correct, if I'm correct, then it makes sense. Yes, and then there is something actually probably with like certain symbols are being used with certain crimes because it actually has to show like a symbol of crossing the abyss and death, maybe like that. But yeah, I do. It's just a theory that I have that some of them, in my opinion, going by how I understand symbolism and certain things, it is actually referring to death as in itself.
Well, that's interesting because I presume there is definitely a commonly accepted occult ritual understanding of that symbol.
Yeah. Now the thing is, though, in my opinion, the death is on the magician's self. It's not on other people, but that symbology is being used.
Yeah. It still could be the basis of someone else misinterpreting it.
Yeah. Well, I think that also happens a lot. And what's unfortunate is I do think sometimes when that stuff does happen, it's much more salacious and that catches on. And then the ignorance of those symbols that the people even originally used them for gets taken on by the mass population and completely understands the truth. So that's another thing that sucks with that situation as well.
That's interesting.
That's my opinion. That's just my opinion on certain things that I've
seen. I appreciate the magical input.
Yeah, well, no, it's just like some things are just so off base. It's like you have to like start wondering, like, how does that even happen? And you just watch the media fucking kind of does it anyway, you know. Or I'd hate to say, interesting people that pop up into certain communities that all of a sudden have like a one answer to everything. You know what I'm saying? There's no if, ends, or buts. This is the vacuum chamber answer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, before I share that video clip, I appreciate those thoughts. Nick. Before I share that video clip, then let me. You sparked a thought in my brain hole here to get back to some of this occult symbolism and understanding, possibly, of the smiley face. When I saw this picture on, oh, that's not good. You can't see that. Can you see that? The smiley face enchanted wizards symbol here on this pen. That's accordingly a VIP.
Yes.
You know, this is that extension of the Masonic order that we've discussed in previous shows and other topics relative to some of these cult activities. And they meet in grottos. I call them the Enchanted Wizards. I don't remember their actual name.
Something like that.
It is something to that regard. Yeah. I just like to be a smart ass and call them Enchanted Wizards.
Was that the picture from Mike's post?
Yeah, so like they seem to use that in a VIP kind of status there on a pen. Like I assume within the Enchanted Wizards, that smiley face has an understanding, and that symbolism has an commonly accepted and understanding where people see that, like, oh, that the guy wearing the smiley face VIP, like that's an important guy in their little grotto system.
I want to give a shout out to Mike. I want to give a shout out to Mike for that. You know what's so crazy is that besides you, there was a few other people, and I think I said this to you earlier. There are people that I see, every once in a blue will like tag me or make a comment. And I had like a few people send me Mike's post. And I'm like, that's kind of funny that they might not even know that he's like, kind of like, he's an occult reject. At this point, like he's on the show, he brings topics, he covers shit. So I thought it was kind of funny. And then when you sent it to me, I was like, yeah, that's funny. Like, I think that's cool. I want to give a shout out to Mike though. I mean, he brought that up to me, and it is a topic that I did tell him I wanted to cover. Believe it or not, me and Lux had talked about covering them. That's how old of an idea that topic was. So that's
definitely a fez though, right? Isn't that a fez on that individual's?
Yeah, it's a like certain almost kind of like there's also another version. I forgot the name of it. It's like almost like different versions of Shriners, believe it or not.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely a Masonic order. So, I mean, yeah, they're right there. For example, last time I went to when I first saw that, actually, at least that I remember seeing it, I visited the George Washington National Monument in Alexandria, Virginia. They have like a little museum there, which that's a whole different order of Masonic lodges that I was not hip to before going there. They have like their own George Washington Lodge system, which has sites in like Salt Lake City, which causes a lot of Mormon red flags that go off from a brain hole. So I'm like, that's a different topic. But in that museum, they have like, different orders of Masonic stuff I'd never even heard of. And one of them was this mystic order of the Enchanted Wizards, I call them, the mystic order of veiled prophets of the enchanted realm. And they meet in something called grottos, which, to my understanding, previous to this discovery, was grottos where witches meet, not where Masons meet, but clearly some Masons call them their formations, not lodges, but grottos. But yeah, that's definitely some sort of fez situation. I mean, they have some interesting. I mean, the moment I saw that they're using the smiley face, I'm like, I got to learn more of how they're incorporating this into their system and what it means to them. That's kind of where I'm at with it. You know what I mean? Like because to me, it's an accepted symbol. Like that's not just like, hey, we're 1993 this year, guys. We're putting the smiley face symbol on our pens for the 93 convention. I don't think that's what that was. Like, I suspect
I was going to say 93 when I saw the pin, but I was like, wait.
Yeah. So, a lot of wordplay with that stuff. Again, Half Moon with Todd Geib here in this comment by Stage Drownings. That's another great example I have for Mound. That's a Mound complex site in the middle of nowhere, Michigan. So it's hard to say, or hard for someone to dispel that's not a mound ritual human sacrifice death. Again, I use a lot of other examples to emphasize some of those cities, but that one's easy because it's rural. There's nothing around there. Todd Geib's from there. I mean, it's an easy example. I mean, cities like La Crosse or other Minneapolis, some of these other towns that have a lot of victims, I think the best evidence is towns of a similar nature that don't have mounds, don't have any victims. That's what I call my Albuquerque hypothesis. Whereas Albuquerque, New Mexico should have 10 times the victims of La Crosse, Wisconsin. I believe they have 12. So I believe Albuquerque per capita on the same scale as La Crosse should have somewhere around, at least a couple dozen. I think it was actually 3.5 times. So we'll call it 50 victims, but they have 0. So it's, so there seems to be something to these mound aspects to these crimes for sure with that stuff. But if I can just show you all the clip here with Kevin Gannon going over some of these other graffiti, and then we'll have some open the floor for some closing statements to both Nick, you and Lisa both. Appreciate your all's time. It's been a great conversation here, and hopefully, according to the chat, it's been very informative and entertaining for folks. Because it can be somewhat of a dry subject, I suppose. And even though it's I find murder to be a serious subject, and I certainly intend to educate folks on this phenomenon as efforts to quell the future occurrences of it. It is a subject that I don't necessarily intend to joke about, but oftentimes end up joking about.
Well,
but yeah, I think it's
just to deal with the JJ. Sometimes you have to.
No, for sure. But yeah, let me pull up this this Kevin Gannon clip here, because I think it is important aspect, as Lisa was commenting on the different signatures and different symbols at different locations. That it's not always just the smiley face either. And there are very satanic, other seemingly satanic graffiti that's being left precisely at these sites. Again, this is a site, as they're going to go over in the video, where the victim was found literally right at the foot of this tree, not even in the water. And this is an individual they claimed drowned and refused to release his name. This happened last year at Lady Bird Lake.
No. The guy who found the body was out here smoking a joint. He found the body. There was a bottle of vodka and a laptop next to the guy, and I believe he had work boots on. We can overlay the photo, blur most of it out, but we can overlay that later. But
you can see the downward cross right there.
Right here, right where you're standing.
666 on the tree.
And we just looked over
that was like
right here. I just want to get your take on what you think about the graffiti and
what's that, Nick?
That was like the symbol on the tree was pretty much
right here.
Yeah, it's like Venus, really, almost.
That's what they get into. Yeah, they talk about that here. Yeah, it is almost a Venus symbol, right? And it's got the 666 right here above it. I mean, it could be a downward above that. Yeah, I don't know. It looks almost like runic, doesn't it?
Yeah, not for nothing. Listen, I don't always agree with some of this graffiti stuff. The shit in Austin, I actually think is probably more possible because, and the way she explains it, that stuff was probably there for only a few weeks. When if you're catching this graffiti and this supposed death happening, there's a good chance that's actually fresh. So I do believe that stuff is possible. But not for nothing, that shit on that tree looks actually kind of like dark. At least the top does. To me, that doesn't look like it's too old.
No, it looks pretty fresh. Yeah, and this looks like runes to me, quite honestly, at the top of the graffiti. And again, there is numerous cults that incorporate runes and Satanism, so it's not like it's just like an easy, it's these guys, you know what I mean? But it is, I think it does get closer to understanding what's going on here, is identifying these aspects.
That's even like another thing. Like if people start making sigils, sometimes it's not plain as day. Because when you have if you want to make a sigil and you're using magical squares to do it, you have the 3x3, the 4x4, the 5x5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. You have like 6 different squares that you could use to start making sigils. So it's like, how do you even really know what you're even looking at sometimes? Because it can be very specific to the person. You know what I'm saying? You may not even know.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Because isn't that something Crowley promotes, is you have to create your own sigils?
Oh, I mean, I kind of I would sometimes to state my intentions anyway, in a sense. So yeah, I mean, okay. I used to make my own sigils when I made talismans. Like I would put a sigil onto a talisman, as many other things.
Interesting.
So, but yeah, I mean, I definitely
I think it's something to consider. I think it's something to consider for sure with this graffiti.
I definitely use sigils a lot, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be something I would commonly expect. I would expect to see at some of these sites as sigils that have been made uniquely for the individuals perpetrating the crime. And given Delphi has caused me to open up my eyes relative to a lot of these runic actions. There's a lot of runes at a lot of different criminal occult sites. Like it's I'm gonna say it's rampant and widespread, but I mean it's also not very unique. There's a lot of use of it, but it seems to be a common aspect of these crimes as well, though. So, yeah, let's. Oh, did you have something to say there, Lisa?
Just really quickly, do you think that maybe possibly some of these places are being run by factions, kind of like with cartels? You know, you have cartels in the north, cartels in the south, cartels in the east, and they all have their different, you know, what have you. And it could very well easily be like, you know, for lack of a better way to say it, you know, like this more Nordic, you know, cartel or whatever runs up this way. The Mexican cartels run this.
Sure.
I don't know, whatever runs on the east side. And it's all potentially, you know, they're communicating with each other, whether online, but also with these sigils. Because we've seen that some of these cartels, and I say cartel because I'm familiar with cartel, but, you know, with these factions, regardless of what ethnicity or race they are, they all somehow subscribe to an occult practice. And most of the people that set up these gangs, cult, what have you, do it in a way that is very cult-ish, that is based on occultism. Right? Would you say that's correct?
I think you're spot on. Yeah, I think that's exactly how it goes. I think it's like you explained. It's like a fiefdom almost. Is the way you're explaining. It's like almost like a medieval kind of fiefdom.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was it.
I think that's a great point. And it looks like the chat's agreeing with you as well. So let's get back to this is a very brief clip. You're going over the rest of these symbols, but let's see what else they have to say.
What you think happened according to the story that I just told you?
Well, obviously, for me, it looks suspicious, the fact that it would be right here. Was it? I heard there was another individual that was possibly at the scene, so we don't know if he did it right at that time. But if obviously it was fresh when the body was found, and the fact that he was dumped right at this location seems like it was specifically the body was placed here for a reason, and obviously for this. What turned me on to, I saw your video online that time, was right. I saw the 666.
Right.
And then obviously this what looks here like the female sign, not quite an upside down crucifix, but I don't know if the individual, the victim, was gay or deceased. It could have been.
So that's the female sign you were mentioning, right, Nick? The Venus symbol.
Venus. But you know what, too? You turn that upside down, and it looks like a thing in Catholicism that you see people holding in their hands. I mean,
yeah.
So I mean, that thing could be so many different things, but yeah.
Something they were throwing at him because saying like die you bitch kind of a thing with doing the female sign, but the 666, and I can't really see in the sun now, but it could be something else that's ritualistic with like a flower or a 3-leaf clover, almost like the way we have in some of our cases, Celtic cross and stuff like that. So those things are ritualistic pieces.
And that's what that at the bottom there could be as well, right?
Yeah, it could be, because I can't see it clearly enough. Hopefully it'll come out on camera, but those are the ritualistic things that I would be looking for. And if that's there where our body is, then it kind of relates to the fact that it could be related to our group.
Right. And it is near the water, but
so isn't that wild? Like, to the point, these graffiti's often, cleaned up immediately or within a week. They find this body right here with this same symbols from the original Smiley Face Killer detective saying, like, this is fitting the MO. This is exactly what we're looking for.
You know what I think is the most impressive occult symbolism in that thing was his T-shirt.
The Spider-Man.
Yes, exactly.
That was the first thing I said after I saw that. I'm like, and the black and white spider. Very interesting. Okay.
I think his nickname is Spider.
I mean, I'm sure he probably has no idea like what that symbol might actually be about. But yeah, I think that's very interesting.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, Nick, Lisa, I appreciate your folks' time here discussing the Smiley Face Killer cold here this evening. I hope it's been an enjoyable experience for you both. Y'all have any closing words here? I'm sure it's enjoyable as it can be discussing occult, ritualistic, human sacrifice and murder. Do y'all have any closing comments for the folks of the interwebs?
I'll go first. JJ, thank you very much for having us on. It is absolutely always I look forward to these discussions, even though as morbid as they are, one, because I don't think there's enough that can be said in the face of so many people saying that there is nothing going on. So that's first and foremost. The other thing that I would like to say is just, if people that are listening, talk about it more, because I think this is something that is very tragic. I mean, the fact that you actually have young men turning up dead, regardless of how it happened or who did it, and the fact that it is easily swept under the rug as, oh, they got drunk and they drowned and case closed. I think that is extremely sad for that to be happening anywhere, even if it's just once. And it's been happening a lot for a very long time. And that's pretty much what I want to say. And also, if you can, check out the 5-part series of the Smiley Face Killers on the Occult Rejects. I think we all did such a great job. We did a lot of research, so definitely check it out. And if you want also to read, definitely check out the Occult Research Institute. We have a lot of contributors to the site that have contributed enormous amount of work of different types of topics. So give it a look.
For sure. Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate those comments. Yeah, I highly recommend that series as well. I think we definitely breached some areas of this phenomenon that other folks are not discussing. And appreciate your time, Lisa, and all your input and efforts here. I find you have a unique perspective on a lot of the aspects of this stuff. Again, I wasn't even considering a lot of the tech world relative to a lot of these things, but yeah, there's certainly a lot of implications there relative to that community.
I think that's why we have such a great time when we do cover these topics, because we all look at it at a different angle.
For sure.
We really do have our own ways of looking at it. So yeah. But thank you very much, JJ, for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Appreciate it.
When you asked, I was like, oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Like, I really
I've been wanting to put together a review like this for a while. So yeah, glad it came together well.
And like Lisa did say, definitely check out that 5-part series. This was a lot of work from JJ and a lot of work from Lisa in that.
I'll put a link to the shows in the show notes here for all those, so make it easier for folks to go find.
They definitely put in a lot of work. Like I can say, because I set up this stuff. I mean, we spent months probably doing this, so it wasn't
a good series.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't. It's chock full of a lot of things that I think we may not all be right, but I think it does give you avenues to maybe look at that might have some merit. Very weird stuff.
It's definitely a lot of stuff that nobody else is talking about and looking at different avenues.
That's a good point.
Yes. And thank you again, man. Like I said, I always appreciate having us on. And so it's always great having you on the Occult Rejects. I appreciate everything you say to the show as well.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Nick. Thanks again for joining me here. And perhaps we'll have to do another Smiley Face Killer Cult review here in the future, or on the Occult Rejects and/or here on Operation GCD. But again, folks, the interwebs, thanks for your time. And Nick and Lisa, thanks for your time as well. Have a good evening.
Well, that's it. That's the show here, folks. So the next time you're out on the town, visiting your local watering holes, or perhaps just meandering around, and you hear the unmistakable sounds of metal clanking, and you spot signs of a disturbance, well, check your six. Look in that garbage can, 'cause you never can tell. The GCDs may be loose in your town.